So joining me on set, it's a good friend of mine, a colleague. We worked together for several years at Win TV. He is I don't know if I want to use the word veteran, he might feel old. So let me just say he's a wise individual, right? Well seasoned, yeah, as we Trini people are, right? Let's welcome at this time Mr. Hansley Ajodha.
Hi, Sheldon. Thank you very much.
No problem, no problem.
Listen, I'm 50 this year, so I'm old.
You're old.
So I'm old.
Nah, yes, well seasoned. Let's stick with season.
And thank you very much.
And of course, everyone know about your history in terms of theatre and all of that. I mean, the list is as long as both of my arms and continuing. But we're focusing today on the political landscape of TNT.
Sure.
You have been deeply involved in terms of from your past, in terms of your history, your interviews, your interactions and so forth with various political leaders on either side of the fence. So I want to have a really candid discussion with you about where we are today. I spoke to both Miss Nicole Young and Miss Sharon Mirage Durham about, what's their vision. And one of the questions that I threw at them, we focus a lot on who vote for us. We sometimes don't pay any mind to who did not vote for us and may have voted for the other party. But there is this large chunk of who didn't vote for anybody at all who seems to be ignored. We are comfortable. You know what? I won.
Yeah.
And that's it. But do you believe that has potentially been a thorn in the side of progress when it comes to politics? Because we're not progressing, and to me, we're ignoring a big issue. Now, they are saying that they're aware and they are going to deal with that, but we've heard it before. I mean, are you concerned, given your history and analyzing politics in TNT?
I certainly am. Back in 1988 is when I started covering politics for the media. Before that, I was strictly in theatre and doing television, dramatic television during that time. Sheldon, you're absolutely right. It's been a thorn in the side. It's been a bugbear for Trinidad and Tobago. And since 1956, and it started with the turf war, as I called it. The DLP, the Democratic Labour Party, and of course the People's National Movement were the two main contenders at that time. They were the heavyweights in the politics. And they established what we call the overall philosophy of tribalism and turf. So the DLP needed to, their side of voters, their bank of voters, and the PNM also knew where they were going. And I think most of that really happened in 1958, around that period. And in 1962, I think there was actually an agreement. The rhetoric in the politics was certainly worse than we saw now. The racial division started during that time, and it was a political necessity because our people really didn't understand this whole issue of race. People in Trinidad and Tobago during that time, they needed each other. The two major races in the country needed each other. The politics needed them, but it needed them to be divided. So then it became an us and them kind of mentality. As a matter of fact, Ronnie Williams, in an interview, who was working closely to Dr. Eric Williams during that time, confessed that he told Dr. Williams, listen, if they don't vote for you, you don't look after them.
Wow.
And he admitted that on television. I saw the documentary and several documentaries after that on exploring the politics in Trinidad. So that's where it all began. And now today we are certainly reaping the seeds of discontent that were planted here so many years ago that caused our people to become political pawns in a much larger game. But I think many of our politicians are coming out of that. We saw with the advent of the NAR, we saw changes where that was concerned. I have to say Mr. Manning was also one of those people who started to push for that level of change. Our politicians today, I have to admit, Basdeo Pandey, Mrs. Bisessa, and Dr. Rowley, and much as people really want to go with the rumors that they've been having, I think many of our politicians today, particularly in this government and the previous administration, made tremendous efforts to change that tribal politics that came in during the late 50s and the early 60s.
If we were to use the analogy of, you mentioned that we're reaping what was sown.
Yeah.
and we're basically reaping rotten fruit because of what happened.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at an open field where there's rotten fruit scattered, you have a situation where what I'm seeing is that many of them are trying.
Yeah.
But what's happening is that we are removing the rotten fruit from on the surface, but then the trees of which these rotten fruit fell from are still deeply rooted. Do you think it's an uphill battle? Do you think we are so far gone because of what history has fed us, that some of these politicians, they are becoming disenchanted? You know, do we need a new breed of politics? Do we need some fresh faces? Is this country willing to accept? And that's been a big thing. Jack Warner tried it. Many tried it. We have now PEP.
Yeah.
They're all trying to, but it seems to be difficult to uproot what has been planted.
I think, first of all, as you mentioned, Pep, Philip Edward Alexander came out and made an outburst there that I think is going to see him interred in the political cemetery. It was a terrible statement that he made. And,
Statement or statements?
Well, statements indeed, but there was one particular quote about, kissing his red so-and-so,
right,
who didn't vote for him. I mean, that was the mistake of mistakes. 1986. We must never discount the intelligence of this public. 1986, 33-3.
Yes.
People said they were fed up. They wanted the change. Bastio Pandey, 1995. But let's not forget, Mr. Pandey won. He was the first person outside of the People's National Movement to be re-elected to office. Remember, in 2000, he was re-elected with a majority where he didn't even need Tobago. And Tobago came back in. He threw it away. Sadly, he threw it away. But people were happy with the way Mr. Pandey was running the country. Even during the time of Mr. Manning, crime was a bugbear during that. And I think that is what essentially put Mr. Manning out. But when you looked at what the PNM had done in Point Lisas is a central community. And they established one of the most powerful energy sectors in the country. I think South, however, and this is another story for us, you and I as Southerners, to discuss, that South hasn't really gotten her just due. And I think that was regrettable. But that's another story. When you look at what Mrs. Bissessa was doing, she started connecting roads. There was a national spatial policy that came in under Ministry of Planning on her then Planning Minister, Dr. Bo Tiwari. Dr. Rowley isn't stopping those projects. He's trying to move along with the projects. I don't think any of our politicians really want to see the politics of division. However, it's difficult for them to let go because it's a security blanket.
Right.
It's a security blanket for them to hold on to if you want to hold on to power. But many of them are trying to find a way to meander around
without,
the politics of tribalism.
Too many toes,
and without mashing it. I mean, if we were to look at Dr. Rowley's main men around him, one would say it's not a reflection of what obtained in the 1970s. Look at Jack Warner. You mentioned Jack Warner. Chaguanas West. Who would think the UNC would have taken such a beating? And listen, that's a worse beating than George Foreman took against Muhammad Ali. And it was a severe beating. So it showed that people are intellectually free in this country, and we must never discount Trinbagonians, because Tobago, I'm telling you, I witnessed in Calder Hall. I was sitting on the balcony of my friend's home in Calder Hall, next to a family, and one came out in yellow and one came out in red. The husband came out in yellow and the wife came out in red, both supporting two different political parties. One was supporting Ashworth Jack and the other was supporting the candidates of Patrick Manning. And so our country has the ability to start moving away from it. I will tell you this. The specter of corruption in the country, I think, is our biggest hurt. We have seen also the early establishment of housing schemes in the country for the purpose of voter padding, where the people were not given the opportunity to assimilate in their general surroundings. So we set up artificial communities without green spaces where the children will not play. We stacked people on top of each other like sardines, literally. There were no schools, educational institutes. And there was a kind of dehumanizing that went on. And because of that now, because of people being left out, our politics caused people to be left out of the general movement of the country. We should have been in a better off position, but there were people whose hopes were dashed simply because they were ill prepared for what was a new impetus in the country.
So that brings me to my next question, and it goes back to what we've been seeing as a very disturbing trend from the general elections to by-elections to whichever elections we may have, that the voter turnouts are just so extremely low. And it's because there is a trust factor that we have to consider. When I spoke to Ms. Nico Young as well as Sharon Mirage, they were concerned, but they were not worried, if you understand what I'm saying. Stating that Ms. Young made the point that if you realize that this has been going on for quite some time, but it's not something that we can just simply turn a blind eye to. This is and again, that's why I said in the beginning, are we putting emphasis on those who have not vote for anyone at all, and find out why? Because people just don't care. They don't.
Interestingly, Sheldon, this is the first time that I've seen where the two major political parties have lost ground and loyalty in such a large number.
Very large. Because I think they combined, they may have gotten about 4,000 and something. They're about out of 13,444.
It's actually a great opportunity for a new dispensation with fresh faces and new people, because we have seen a regurgitation of the same type of negative issues constantly affecting these parties coming over and over again. There's only so much a country could possibly take. They're fed up of what they're seeing. It's a new opportunity for new people. But there was a point you were making with respect to the numbers in the country. There is something that I think both political parties, while clinging to their base, don't seem to realize. There's a bank of swing voters in this country who vote on conscience. These are the people who you don't see going to the rallies. These are the people who you don't see in political meetings. But these are the people who are sitting in their homes and looking and listening to what's going on. And they're the ones. They have grown since 1986. They've grown when we saw that rapid change with the NAR. And they're getting increasing in number. And they're putting parties in to government and taking them back out. Because while the base may not change, I don't think that anybody right now knows how to appeal to that swing voter that exists, and they're trying to identify it, whether it's a Presbyterian church, whether it's a Christian community, whether it's a Muslim community, whether it's the mixed community. They're trying to put their finger on it. But what we're looking at is a highly educated public. Our Trinidad has so many educated people that it shows that the expansion of education in the country has caused more conscientious people to become part of the voter bank. And I think that's what we're seeing now.
You mentioned educated, and there are some who may or may not agree with this statement I'm about to make, and it's the bubblehead syndrome, whereby there are people who allow their heart to control logic.
Their head.
And they speak about if you're having a surgery, if let's say you are brain dead, your body shuts down, right? But if your heart stops, your brain will still function. I'm saying that to say that, do you find that we have people generally in this country who claim to be intelligent, but because we're so emotionally wrapped up in all that's happening, we still can't make, at times, informed decisions? Because again, I go back to, yes, brilliant country, brilliant people, the pool is endless. Then why do we seem to be going in circles? And when you look on social media, even men and women who I respect and who I look up to, they get into these emotional arguments. I'm like,
thin-skinned.
What's going on? Are you not seeing beyond the surface? That's why I love your comments, because at the end of the day, you analyze, and you give something that you could, let me think about this. Let me think for a change, as my guest said. Yes, let me think for a change, not just, but to make change. I mean, why is that?
I made a cardinal error during the course of my own journalistic career. I call it a cardinal error because I realize it was coming from me, who grew up in San Fernando and who worked within the theater, etc., that the population would have expected a little more from me. I declared where I stood politically. You would remember that. And of course, it was with the United National Congress during that time. My family has always been a traditional PNM family. We were from San Fernando. We voted PNM. Change came in 1986, and of course things happened during that time. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I supported the UNC because of Mr. Pandey at that time, because I felt he had done such an extraordinary and wonderful job as Prime Minister during that period. I felt I didn't like some of the policies that were playing along. However, the reason why I said it was a mistake is that because I should have been reflected a greater intelligentsia and intelligence by a public who would have expected me to guide them with the facts and the truth instead of trying to foist my own opinion on it, which was, I believe, a mistake on reflection and in hindsight. There are people who are thin-skinned because of their passions. We are very passionate people in Trinidad.
And passion is fine.
Yeah, and emotional. That's why we love soap operas. I think we look at more soap operas per capita than any other place. The Indian soaps do well across the board, across the demographics.
That is
because
true.
we love that. The reason why we have so many murder-suicides in this country is because we are an emotional people. We are an emotive
and that can work
people.
for you and against you.
And it has worked against us politically. I mean, if we were to sit and analyze the politics, I would, and we look at at what we're witnessing now, I think more and more people, from what we've seen in this by-election, because the UNC didn't win by a big majority.
Correct.
So it's not an overwhelming, emotive victory where people are completely...
Both parties need to analyze.
They're still
where
cautious.
they go forward,
The public is still very cautious. So you're not home free. You know, it's not a big six. You know, you walked inside there, you stood in the wicket, but you didn't make big runs. But you managed to keep your wicket. And so I am saying that what we ultimately need in the country, as politicians, what they need to understand is that the intelligence of the country has grown. Things are different. People will recognize the BS when they see it. And we have got now to appeal to that. The problem is many of our politicians are so steeped in what was the historical antecedents of our political history that they don't know how to change, how to respond to the new thing. They could have manipulated the electronic media, they could have manipulated the print media, but the social media is the giant that they're unable to slay. And that's where more and more is going to come out. And many of our politicians don't know how to respond to the social media. Stuart Young, his frustration came out when he said that they're lying, all this is fine. And you saw his frustration. He was even going red when he was saying it. And so it just goes to show that the social media now is going to bury many of those who came in the first, say, 30, 40 years of our political history. Today is a new time. For instance, I looked at your interview with Michaela Pandey. Lovely, lovely girl. But, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, I know you're quite close to Michaela and you're quite close to all of them. Michaela has to stop looking like a bad imitation of her dad. Because she comes across like even the guttural H you have and all
how
of
she speaks.
I know that wasn't Michaela in Knapp skills. But if Michaela lets the true Michaela
Because
come
there are
out,
those who will continue to compare her to her father,
Right,
which could work for and against.
and she's not doing it to change it. She's not doing anything to change it because she comes across as though she's parodying her dad. And if you know the real Michaela, if you know the girl that I know, that's all she needs to let flow, you know. Because you and I will agree, she's a lovely, brilliant, supremely talented, very sincere, very kind and gentle
She
girl.
loves this country. She loves this country.
And she's very passionate. So if she gets more of that and leave the icon alone, you know, don't be the icon. No, everybody loved Dr. Eric Williams.
They will find any means to say, You're just like your father.
Yeah, and she's not helping it, as I said. What she needs to do, Shell, is to change her demeanor and let more of Michaela flow as opposed to Mr. Pandey's daughter. And once she does that, I think there's a brilliant future for Michaela in the politics. I love the fact that our candidate is it Sharon?
Sharon Mirage.
And
Nicole Young.
Nicole. Even that we're seeing more young people. Nicole is a very bright girl, you know. Brilliant girl. If you look at her speak, she's very intelligent. She's very much in touch. Right. And we've got some really extraordinary young people who are coming up. So the social media is going to see the advent of new and stronger faces. I have the confidence of that happening over the next year to 2 years. And I think we're going to see the old taking their final bow and their final exit.
And I think it's really high time that we embrace more youth in the politics.
Yeah.
It is something I think is needed at this time, because for a long time in hearing, we don't have a voice and we don't have a voice. So I think it's fitting right now.
I think a lot of our youth, however, and I've witnessed this in the politics, many of our youth, every one of them thinks they could be prime minister. And they've got to guard themselves against that kind of behavior. They get very cocky when they go in, you know. And because they follow bad habits. They adopt the bad habits of those who would have mentored them in the politics. And they carry those habits with them. So our young people have got to know, listen, you have to listen to people. You can't be cocky.
And you have to be mentored.
And you have to be mentored. You also have to listen to people, listen to the old folks. They dismiss that. If you don't share their opinion, they become antagonistic. That has got to change for the young people who are coming into the politics now.
And the thing is, it is said, before we go to the break and wrap up on discussion, to be a good leader, you have to learn how to be led.
That's right.
And I think, if as young people, if we understand that, then we'll reach a lot further.
There's a King Arthur philosophy of the round table. It's equidistant from the center. Everybody is equal around this table. Yeah, and there's no head, there's no tail on the table. It's round. And that's a King Arthur philosophy that I wish more of us could practice.
And apply. The political landscape of Trinidad and Tobago, is it a slippery slope? Maybe so. But we can do what we have to do to make sure we can all climb that slope together and not slide right back down and hurt each other. As we come to a close in this interview, which I thoroughly enjoyed, thank you so very much, Hansley, for being our guest this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Just want to touch a little bit again on the third party. Do you think generally people would be willing to accept wholeheartedly a third party or give a third party chance to govern this country? I think we are maturing, yes, but that is something that has always seemed to fail us.
I think a third party, what happened with the ONR is we're going to still see that phenomena taking place again. Attracting a powerful few, a large number of people, but may not be able to hold on to enough seats to form a government. Unless if we have radical constitutional reform and
Mr. Pandey has been calling for, interestingly enough.
Right. Unless if we do that, but Mr. Pandey didn't change it.
Right.
Because the way the structure of our constitution favors the winner. This is like a two-way fight, It's been structured that way. However, what is going to happen? This is the first time, as I said, that people are really disgruntled with both political parties.
Definitely.
So the options for a clear victory for either isn't there. So it's still, the jury is still out. I think what we're going to witness is that the third parties continue to be the hedge factor. The hinge, the fulcrum by which somebody is going to jump into office. And this is in lieu of what we call political constitutional reform. One of the parties that people have got to look at is what Watson Duke is doing in Tobago. And people aren't paying attention to that.
There are few who have been making those statements, and I've been listening.
So Watson Duke just may well start creating a factor in Tobago, and Watson Duke may spill into the East-West corridor.
Appeal, though? There's an appeal of Mr. Watson Duke that no matter what theatrics and so forth, he just draws people in.
He gets things done. That's
Bottom
the
line.
end of it.
Yeah.
You know, Donald Trump is not the most popular fellow on the planet, but you're starting to see results from what he's doing, his policies. So he's winning where people are concerned.
And where it matters.
And where
Results.
it matters,
Yeah.
in the pocket. And Watson Duke is in a position whereby he can negotiate on behalf of large numbers of people and make them happy. Because if he gives them a 3% or a 10% or a 12%, it's an increase for them. So he has that leverage. So I think he's going to make some inroads into the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. He's going to factor greatly. I think there is also room for another party. I think Michaela has a strong future, but she has to attract the right people and listen to them. She seems to have started off strong. And
Yeah, she's had some support.
but it's not like the old days of the NJAC, where the third party wasn't factoring. It's not until 1981 when we saw the ONR coming in with Carl Hudson Phillips and the DAC in Tobago that we started to see where the third party became a stronger factor. And then we saw the ULF growing into something a little more powerful during that time. We've got 2 years. I still don't think that a third party is going to be given the full nod.
Not at this time. Not
Now. It may happen probably in another 2 elections. I predict probably in the next 2 elections, that's given another 10 years, that we're going to see a fresh party taking over the landscape. The UNC is a fresh party. The UNC was formed in 1988. Well, it was Club 88 and came in 1989, 1990 or somewhere or thereabouts. I'm not sure of the actual year. But they grew and they took government. It took Mr. Pandey just one election to go from the UNC from Club 88 in 1988 for the election in 1991 and then won it in 1995. So that's how it went, because the NER lost the election in 1991. In 1988, the ULF had broken away. The PNM won. Mr. Manning took government, called an early election after 4 years.
Everybody knew that was disastrous.
Right.
Yeah.
And now they're predicting the same is going to happen now. My thoughts are Dr. Rowley is going to hold on.
I was going to ask you that because there were those who would have used, as much as the voter turnout was low, there are those who would have used this recent by-election as a litmus test somewhat to see, where the PNM's, how solid their foundation was.
Yeah.
And now with Barataria swinging to the UNC, which I kind of predicted, and people are saying, this is an indicator of what may happen.
It's an indicator, but not a reason. It's not a reason.
Right.
And Dr. Rowley is going to hold on. They just discovered gas, just off a field about, I think it was yesterday. Now, much of this was work that was put in, I think, at the time when Kevin Ramnarine and Mrs. Bissessa was Prime Minister. Kevin Ramnarine, of course, was Energy Minister, that the work had gone in to start the wider exploration. So we just discovered a gas field. I think Dr. Rowley, in the lead up to the election, we've seen this since the oil boom days, that Dr. Rowley is going to pour some money into the economy. And the difficulties that people are facing, Dr. Rowley is going to do everything he can to bring some relief to that.
I think many people have also been saying that in the last few years, as much as the whatever forepaw, if you want to call it that, of the PNM, the UNC has not done much to rebuild themselves in the midst of everything. I think that is where even UNC supporters have been expressing some concern. What are we doing in these last few years to increase our image or to improve our image?
Even with the victory in Barataria, I felt that they should have gone to work immediately to start, because this is a wind in their sail. This is a second win, so to speak, for a party that lost how many elections? 7? Or 6 or 7?
6, I think it's 7.
And this is a good moral victory for Mrs. Bissessa.
It is. I don't give her wrong for her excitement and her hopeful speech.
But she's got to get her people, rally her troops around her. And maybe she may not quite have the right formula for re-entry into the fight. And she may be just holding on to that, but you can't hold on too long. She's got to go to work now. Dr. Rowley, I don't think, is going to call an early election. Dr. Rowley is going to hold on. I think he's going to take it down the wire to prove himself, because he doesn't want to exit the politics looking like the weakest prime minister we ever had. And he doesn't want to leave that
I think we
legacy.
underestimate his intelligence as well sometimes.
No, he has great political savvy.
He has been around for a very, very, very long time, despite whatever
never-
missteps he may have made along the way.
I think Dr. Rowley's personality gets in his way.
Again, the whole emotional
Right.
you spoke about.
But I think he's quite an intelligent, politically savvy creature. And never to be underestimated. I think it's our underestimation and the UNC's underestimation of Dr. Rowley is what works against
Because he's always calm. I remember I had the opportunity once to interview him. This was for the election for leadership election. It was him against Miss Beckles.
Yeah.
And I had that opportunity to win, and it was an amazing interview.
Yeah.
He was just calm. No matter what I threw at him, he was just calm, and he just fired back. And I'm
He
like,
has it. He has it.
he does.
If you get to know him, he's actually a very, very nice guy. He likes to party. You know, he's easygoing. He's the kind of person that you can approach. The problem with him is that I think he gets nervous when the cameras are around. He gets nervous when he's being bombarded by too many people. I think there's a nervous reaction where that is concerned.
Which is surprising, man. People may think it because of all these years he's been there, but different shoes now.
I think the UNC misreads the politics. I think they haven't managed the politics well. I think that's where they're weak. They make strong governments. They make very brilliant governments. Mr. Pandey, Mrs. Bisesa, hats off to them. A lot of things were happening. But I think the management and the dynamics of the politics is where the UNC misunderstands it.
It's a different beast by itself.
And it certainly is. And the PNM understands who their leader is. The problem is that everybody, including the minister's driver, thinks they're a minister or a prime minister. And that's what they've got to understand, that those who are standing behind the leader and their people and the hierarchy have also got to understand that you've got to wait your turn. So they all go off, and this is a small country. They all go off, let their passions be heard, they echo their sentiments in whatever circles they find themselves. And ultimately, that talk becomes part of a ripple that turns into a tidal wave. And it gets into the country, and they must understand that. But the PNM is a close-knit, clandestine organization that keeps things inside of a vault. The things that could hurt her as a political party, they keep it inside of a vault. And the UNC needs to understand that part. And they must also understand that not because a leader falls means that you have to trample on her or you have to trample on him. You've got to know that to stand behind each other and hold yourself together as a unit. They say that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. But what if you have too many weak links? And I think that's the problem. Great in government, the UNC, poor in politics. The PNM, their governance style has been questionable over the years, and it's the reason why they found themselves in and out so many different times. But when it comes to the politics, they're the masters. They wrote the book on politics. And I always tell people that you can't stop them for that.
On our closing comment, in terms, if you were to send a message to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and looking at the level of divisiveness that we see, particularly on the platform of social media, where I like to say the devil dances around us so many times and we don't even see it. What message would you send? Yes, support who you have to support, but do not allow the hate to poison who we are and to poison the waters of TNT. What message would you send, given that you've been involved in this thing for so long?
The power is in the hand of the people. The power is in the hands of our people. We have to tell them now and instruct them. We can't be sycophants kissing at their feet and eating off the crumbs that they throw at us. We must take the position as the bosses and tell them what we want for this country. This country has been great to me, Sheldon. It has been great to you. I love this country. I don't want to leave this country. I had opportunities to go abroad and work in LA and in the United Kingdom. I turned all of that down. And to stay here and be part of this wonderful, beautiful country that we have. Patriotism must be at the center of everything.
I agree.
Country first. I am a big supporter of Kazim Hussein when he was mayor. I support Kazim Hussein now. I think he's a great man. I love Junior Agrello. I think he's my mayor now. And I'm giving him all the support in the world that he could possibly get. Country must come first. Once we understand that as a population, We will not allow the politicians to manipulate us. We won't find ourselves subject to the disease of sycophancy and how you can be used and misused by people whom you entrusted your faith in. All that can change when you take the position that we're in charge. Our vote is your instruction. And once we go in that direction, I think we'll be okay. We'll start to see the change that is so necessary.
Hansley, it was indeed a pleasure.
Thank you, my brother.
Having you on the other side of the chair.
I'm happy to be here. I like it. I like this.
Yeah. But we'll do this again because we do plan to have a lot more political forums right here on Cloud9 and on ACT and The Voice. And I would love to have you ever so often.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
And thank you very much.
I want us to also, if you don't mind, somewhere in the near future, if you invite me before the end of the year, I'd like to talk about what is happening in terms of our mimicking of what's happening in the larger countries, particularly that of the LGBTQI community.
Yes.
And the loss of spirituality within the country. Because I think we're moving away from our moorings in the society, and it's why our social fabric and rubric is collapsing.
And I think that is where I'm really glad you brought that up because it's something we've been discussing for a while. I think we need to understand how opening that Pandora's box, if we don't know how to close it, we're going to be in some serious problems. I think we get so sidetracked. It's bigger. Like, just to make this point, someone was making the point that Ms. Michelle Smith, who was on my program, she says the LGBT agenda is not an agenda that is pushed by the LGBT. It's an agenda that's pushed by people who are dangling their emotional strings, who have their own agenda and are using them. Yeah. And I think we are not seeing that. Even the church as well, in terms of,
I think it's a dangerous route. I don't think it's something that we're prepared to do. I think that there's a complete lack of understanding of it. And my question is, because there's the question of the sexual orientation. I know we're running off on a tangent, but very quickly. I know it's a question of sexual orientation, but these are things that occur behind the confines of a bedroom. What exactly is the bugbear? What's wrong? We have laws that protect people regardless of who they are. Sometimes I walk down the road and people call me a skinhead, baldy, that kind of thing. We live in that type of society, but why is it that something that occurs in the privacy of a bedroom needs to be such a public issue? As a heterosexual, I don't go about trying to display my sexuality to anybody. And then there's a question of sexual orientation. So what about the fellow who decides that he wants to have, sex with animals? Or the fellow who is a pedophile? Does that qualify under sexual orientation? Is there violation of rights? I mean, do we realize how wide and nasty all these freedoms can get if we start doing that in an already indisciplined society? We can't even obey a speed limit in this country, much less opening it up to even more indiscipline or giving ourselves freedoms that we're not mature enough to understand.
To be continued.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.